Amazing Grace Part 2. The gospel of redemption is called the word of His grace. The scriptures are literally held together by grace. Grace justifies all who believe. Grace brings all blessings. Grace brings salvation. Grace is the source of answered prayer. Grace transforms lives. Grace enables believers to make great sacrifice. Grace comes through faith. Grace is only pure grace when it is devoid of works. Grace brings about the initial revelation in a believer's life. Grace can be received in vain. Grace can be frustrated. Grace can be fallen from back into a life of law and legalism. And grace reigns through righteousness and is stronger than sin. Sin in the believer's life separates him from pure grace. We know that sinning believers have a measure of grace because they are still offspring of God, and this cannot be changed. This measure of grace protects the erring believer until he comes back to his senses and returns to living in the knowledge that he has. Grace is bestowed fully upon the believer at salvation, but knowledge of its benefits is determined by the love affair the believer has with the Christ in him. This love affair with Christ is the main issue with the Heavenly Father who birthed the believer. The seed from the Father is Christ, and the Father will never tolerate anyone misusing his Son's life through disorderly living. Remember, whom he loved, he chastened. The misuse of grace litters the pages of the New Testament. There are the failure of Israel and the first Pentecostal church to live by grace. In the beginning, the Jews were the custodians of the gospel, but their rejection and hatred of John the Baptist, Jesus, and the early disciples caused God to bring destruction upon them. Israel was scattered among all the nations, and God ceased to deal with her as a nation. Second, the failure of the early church to grasp grace is seen beginning in Acts chapter 5, 6, and 15. Believers failed God in their personal conduct and in their doctrines. They began mixing law and grace, which nullifies both from being truth. And most of the early churches and most of the apostles and ministers of that day ignored Paul, who alone had the final gospel of grace. Just think, His grace is sufficient, and if you're in love with Jesus Christ, He is all you need. To God be the glory. God bless you.